Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to do a little bit of colouring today, but I'm going to use watercolour on the new book that I've just had produced. This is using 100% recycled paper, and I really am very pleased with it. I'm just applying a little wash, just a very thin colour, and this is a nice olive green. If you can look here, it's simple Winsor & Newton set, quite easy to find. It's a little travel set, I use it all the time. You can easily change the pans as well if you need to buy new colours for it. So I just thought I'd have a little go and see how this paper behaves with a wash over. And as you can see, you don't need to apply it really dark or neat or tidy, especially in this particular area. This is just the background. Obviously you have to be a bit neater when you're using it where some of the lines should be, but it's actually a really nice paper. Very pleased with it. So what I'm going to do is apply my washes, and what I do sometimes as well, if I find it's a little bit too wet, just get a little tissue, just dab it slightly. That is now ready to go over again if you want to make it a little darker, and it also stops you catching your hands on it if it's not quite dry. Because the paper is really good, it takes the colour quite well, so even before it's completely dry, you know some of the colour is going to be there. Watch this. There you go, and there's still just enough colour in there for you to use. Now in the original painting, this fairy is actually gold in colour, hence the painting is called Avalon's Gold. But I thought what I might do with this one, I've already started as you can see, is turn her into a bit of a winter fairy. So she's going to be a little bit frosty. So I started giving her blue skin. I'm just adding a bit of a darker blue to the inside of the hairline there. So I'm just going to put different shades of blue on this fairy to give it a completely different look. So I think this is a mixture of ultramarine and a little bit of green. It makes like a slight Payne's grey colour, but not too much. It may not match because I started this earlier on, but it doesn't really matter. Now sometimes when the ink's on the paper and there's quite a lot of ink, it can appear to not soak in, but don't give up, just keep going over it lightly with your brush and the paint will definitely adhere. And if you're still not happy, all you have to do is put a bit of paint on and then dab it off and then reapply some more paint and just keep applying it. I like to apply it in layers, you see. There we go. I think I added a little bit of a pinky colour to this one, so I might add a bit more. I don't want to be boring and keep talking about things unless it's useful. Avalon's Gold is now going to become a winter fairy. I think that's what I like when I see all your colouring pieces that you do. The colours that you use are probably, in many cases, completely different to the ones I've used, but they look really amazing. So I'm always very impressed with that. And it's quite nice to see some of the things you think, I wish perhaps I should have painted it that colour myself, but anyway, there we go. So you don't need a great big thick brush. It's not all about applying great big washes and things like that. dab it again. That's almost dry now, so what I can do, I want to add a little bit more depth in the shady part. There's a little crease there in the dress. I think it might be a bit darker down here. Because you've dabbed it with the tissue, it's dry and it's ready to just apply some little highlights over. It's just a technique that I find quite useful. There we go. Just add some little details. And you can go over this again and again because you haven't applied it thickly. You can just keep applying extra little layers, and it's quite subtle really. It's quite enjoyable. So you can add little layers of things and depth. There we go. It's not about super smooth even. It's about adding interest. There we go. Don't know if you can see that, if that's any help to you. I'm new to this filming thing, so it might be completely terrible. We'll see. So I'm going to use a similar ultramarine blue with just a little bit of red added to it, so it's a bit more purpley, you see. I think we'll add that to some of the little flowers in here. I think possibly some of these little pieces here as well. Now, as you can see, I've started adding some colour to the body. It's just this little cerulean blue I used. There we go, not too much of it. And a tiny bit of ultramarine. Let's hope that was what I did before. Now we'll really wash for this. So really quite pale and watery. I'm going to apply that on the leg here. That's it, don't be frightened of putting it on. And it's quite wet, it doesn't matter because this paper will take it. Doesn't even matter if you go over this foliage at this time either, because the colour you're putting on is just so pale that it will hardly be noticed if you went to paint over it later on. So it's just a little bit on the leg. I'm going to dab it with my tissue. It's practically all come off again. So back in I go with another layer. Okay, that's just a tiny bit darker, so I like that better, so I'm going to leave that to dry naturally. I've got it quite even, so that's good. Now this same wash here, I can go over some of the pieces I've already coloured on the skin because it's already dry. So I just add this very pale wash, and you can dab it if you wish with your tissue and keep adding a little bit more until you get the shade you want. Some places you don't need to dab it, and the less water that's on your brush after a while, you won't need to dab it at all. That will allow you to put extra shadow into these areas here, which give the figure a lot more depth. There we go. I mean, I'm just telling you how I do this. This is watercolour. It's something I love doing. You guys, I know you use your pencils and all sorts of wonderful things. So this is just something I thought I'd do. This is the way I would colour my pieces. And that's the reason I tried to make the book as nice a quality as possible, so that you can really play with different mediums. So I've put quite a bit of water on this piece now. So you can make as much depth as you want with these colours. The more you apply, the deeper the colour will become. I like to keep it quite washy, I think, you know, quite subtle, but everybody's different. So I think what we're going to do with this piece here, mix up some cerulean and let's see what happens. It's going to be very slightly different, but not much. All right. Just filling it in a little bit. I think what might be nice is when this piece is finished is actually go over some of this with some gouache. So for those of you who don't know the difference between gouache and watercolour, the gouache will dry to a nice matte finish, and it's quite opaque, so it's not as translucent as watercolour. So the really nice thing with gouache, if you want to go over the top of your watercolour and make it stand out, the opaque white really pops beautifully, so you can make like little frosty pieces. In fact, if I can find my gouache, I could do that for you. I've got white in the watercolour here, which is okay, but it just doesn't have that opaqueness that gouache has. There. It's not a great deal of contrast, but then again, I'm not sure I wanted to on this one. But if we add some frost later, that could look really quite pretty. I should have a bit of gouache over there, so if I can find it, I'll pop that on. So it's just slightly. There we go. Just going to see if I can put a bit of this same blue on these little arm cuffs. That's it. So I'm not colouring the whole piece here, just the shady little bits. This or the edges, but not all of it, because that can dry, and then if I put another little simple wash over the top, those pieces I've already just drawn will be a little bit darker than the rest of it when I paint it in. There we go. Let me just apply it all over them. There. Let that dry, then you can add a bit more of the blue and give it a bit more oomph, which would be really nice. See if I can find the white gouache for you. Yeah, I have a little bit here. There we go. Let's clean your brush off. I'm not going to put some out, I'll just get it on my brush from the tube. So if you don't water it down too much, I don't know if you can see me, if you don't water it down too much, you can actually apply it straight from the tube, and then all you need to do is add some little dashes. Ideally to do this when the painting's finished, because you can then add it to the edges of the leaves or that sort of thing. And it will dry opaque, so it just pops out a bit better. So don't take it completely, obviously you need a slightly damp brush from the tube, because it can be quite thick otherwise. So we could do this, try that, and then if you want to, I suppose we could take some of these little veins down. I'm just playing now, it's going to go horribly wrong. She never used to be a winter fairy. It's going to be now. There you go, and you can just apply it just like little spots. Hopefully you can see that. and that creates like little frosty bits.